This is Endgame. I'm Amanda Cassett. This episode is with Martin Köppelmann of Gnosis and Circles. He's best known for creating some of the best wallet infrastructure in crypto. But here we talk about his passion, UBI, how AI will make us need it, what ideal UBI looks like, and why it shouldn't come from governments or Sam Altman. As a special treat in the last few minutes, I get Martin to explain why he's an AI doomer. Enjoy wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, let's dive in. Do you really think that we're going to end up having UBI? What does it look like? And how do you think that comes about?
I do very much believe we will end up having UBI. I think it will make society better as a whole. So I think there are two dimensions. So one is how much can a society produce? And then how is it distributed? And you could say UBI is just about kind of making sure that everyone gets enough. So it's a redistribution thing. But I actually think it will also lead to society generating more wealth overall. So I think a society that managed to have a UBI will be richer for everyone.
Paint me the picture. How do we go from where we are now to UBI? What are the steps? What are the things that you see happening?
Of course, there is the route that a state will simply implement it. And for various states, it would certainly be possible. And yeah, during COVID times, it already kind of, to some extent, became reality that states realized, well, they could just hand out cash to people, and that could be useful. So that is one route. I also believe it is possible, and we should work on it to figure out ways, to not rely on states. Obviously, in crypto, we have the liberty to ask very fundamental questions around how does money even work, and how do we structure money. And we can do things like structure a kind of money that has UBI as a core principle. So how it in the end, what will work out, or kind of via what route we will get to UBI, and what forms even corporations are involved, in what form maybe dramatic changes in the job market with progress of artificial intelligence. I don't know the exact route, but I know that from various perspectives it makes sense, and it, in my view, can lead from very different perspectives to the same outcome, and that is a UBI.
Do you think that AI is accelerating the potential adoption of UBI? Do you think that AI is doing something so transformative to the job market that people aren't going to be able to generate value without it? Maybe you can paint us a picture of what the job market for humans looks like in 2035, 2040.
Of course, it's very tough to make those predictions, and I'm actually even in the camp of, well, a slight AI doomerism. So I think there is, of course, a picture where we won't exist as humans anymore.
There we go.
But
Problem solved. No UBI and no universal group of people to need it.
right, right. But I think it makes more sense to prepare for the positive outcome. AI will generate more and more wealth. Although I would even say, even pre-AI, we had already, as a society, created enough wealth. So if you just think about it, do we as a society create enough stuff, kind of really just physical output in terms of food and housing, that no one on the world would need to starve and basically have their basic needs covered? Then the answer is very clearly yes. Very clearly, we as a society can produce enough stuff that at least the basic needs of people are covered. And I mean, we even live in such in many parts, we think about how can we increase consumptions. That basically means we have more stuff than people actually even can consume. And we don't even have to think about how can we create more stuff, because there is, in general, and I would say with AI that even accelerates. So we will be able to, well, create even more stuff and goods and services. And then this question, I do think, will become more pressing to make sure that society, or specifically people, will benefit from production capacity or economic
Just to
capacity.
be really clear, though, we already have more stuff than we need as a species in order to have no one be starving. I agree. That stuff has been allocated or distributed according to a market based system so far. And that system has resulted in there being poverty and hunger, but now there's a lot less. And wherever there's poverty and hunger in the world at this point, it's mostly used as a political tool or a weapon rather than actual kind of structural hunger or structural extreme poverty. So, given the fact that we already have a world without extreme poverty or hunger, except for where that's being manipulated, what exactly needs to change in order to give people the proper kind of UBI outcome you'd like to see?
Yeah, I would, or the way I think about it is that UBI is the kind of most clean, yeah, I would say intervention that still maintains as much as possible of a market economy and as much as possible, or well, it fully maintains markets, and it's in my view that's one of the big benefits of UBI versus let's say means tested welfare programs. That kind of, or one way to look at it is that right now, not exactly sure about the numbers in the US, but in Germany, well, if you are on welfare and you start working, then you kind of pay up to 80 or 90% kind of tax on the first dollar you earn. So the first dollar you earn, that is heavily deducted from your welfare. So effectively, you have very little incentive to work a little bit. And only after quite significant threshold, you actually are financially better off. In contrast to that, UBI says basically everyone gets this floor amount of money that's enough to not starve essentially, but you still have the full incentive to work. So it's in a way less meddling with incentives. I would say, therefore, that doesn't have the problem of many of the programs that are meant to eliminate often somewhat socialist states have kind of still those poverty problems because their state interventions lead to, yeah, markets not functioning.
So your vision of proper UBI, this is kind of thin UBI, let's say instead of fat UBI. It's a vision where, correct me where I'm wrong, it's not everything that you could possibly want taken
No,
care
absolutely
of
not. Yeah.
by the government or by the private entity that's offering the UBI. It's the minimum basic needs met. So what are the minimum basic needs that you think should be taken care of by the government or by the entity emitting the UBI, and how much does that cost? How do we determine that correct amount that doesn't disincentivize labor?
For UBI, we don't need to make a decision what the person needs, because I also think that is an issue to say a person needs specifically that and this food or that. In UBI, you wouldn't get stuff; you would get money, and it would then still be your choice how to spend that money. The question, I mean, generally speaking, my version of UBI would be enough to make sure you are able to afford rent. Obviously, certainly not in. I mean, certainly not in every place. I think this also, of course, will vary from society to society, but within the society, whatever is somewhat regular, that would ideally be possible to rent for basic food. But yeah, that's and healthcare and basic healthcare, and that's about it. Or that would probably be about it. What you could afford just from the UBI. So many studies show, or also, I mean, just what we observe shows that people want more. Usually want more. So I mean, there have been studies in UBI where people were actually given UBI, and you would observe that they would still, of course, work. But even just from observing the job market, if someone someone earns let's say 4 times the amount they would need to kind of just have this UBI level, then usually we don't observe that they just work for 1 year and then kind of say, okay, now I saved enough for the next 3 years, and 3 years I will not work. Just usually people then spend more, and then also will continue to work.
Yeah, I've seen those pilot studies as well. They definitely seem to continue to work if they're given that bare minimum. And what you're describing with rent and basic food and healthcare makes sense to me. My question is this: in your vision, who pays for UBI? Because we talk a lot in the US where we don't have free healthcare about instituting free healthcare. But it's not like there's a tree that's the free healthcare tree that grows in the middle of the desert and you can just harvest the free healthcare. There are doctors that have to provide it. Maybe those doctors get enslaved by the government and they have to provide you healthcare. Maybe, the tax base has to pay the doctors' salaries, proper salaries, and then they do the healthcare. And then it's the taxpayers, disproportionately the rich, that are subsidizing the universal free healthcare. So this UBI, where do you ideally see it coming from?
I think this will be different for different, for different societies. In Europe, it's very much accepted by society that the state does play a role and collects taxes, well, from income, from VAT, I mean, kind of a range of taxes, and of course, then those taxes are already used in a big way to finance welfare programs. And in that sense, the UBI would just be, kind of in a way changing the way welfare programs, and not making them means tested, rather, kind of make it.
Replace them. So in some places,
Yes.
we would remove the means tested welfare programs and replace it with a non-means tested, so everyone gets it equally. There's no more administration of the welfare state. Everyone's just getting a blanket, whatever it is, $10,000 a year, so that they aren't starving and so that they have a place to live. And if they get sick, they get taken care of, and that gets paid through taxes. That could actually theoretically be cheaper than a lot of existing means tested welfare programs in many places, right?
No, for sure. I mean, for sure, there is the, well, just simply administration cost reduction. But then I also think the quite important is this, getting incentives better, and making it more attractive to, essentially to work.
Okay, so let's say we're in this environment where welfare has been removed. Most states, post industrial states, have welfare. Let's say this very thin UBI is instated instead of welfare. Let's say it's roughly the same cost to the tax base as the current welfare state, or maybe a little bit lower. It isn't means testing people. How would prices not simply adjust such that the purchasing power of the individual is the same thing it was before the UBI? So, like during
Yeah,
stimmies, this kind of happened, right? Like stimmies, or I mean, I'm using a cute term. So that the stimulus in the U.S. gave non-means tested funding to a bunch of people. Those people tended to spend it on certain kinds of items. The result was that even in the short period this was happening, the price of those items increased. The goal of any of these programs is to improve the purchasing power of people that could go without. So, how do you keep the purchasing power stable?
yeah. I would say in the COVID case, it was certainly slightly more complex. It was certainly also related to supply chains getting potentially interrupted, and therefore having shortage of specific goods. Yeah, I mean, I think there will be, or there can be some effect, but generally, I would still kind of go back to the initial observation that we as a society are able to produce enough stuff. So just from that intuition, it should work out to have a to find a level where you have a UBI that covers basic needs.
How would you prevent scope creep in terms of what the
Mhm.
UBI was? So in the US,
Yeah.
and again, like I'm an American, so I know a lot more about US history than other places. If you read a history of entitlements in the US, the first ever entitlements program was for US Revolutionary War veterans. And then there was another one for Civil War veterans. And what ended up happening is way more people came forward to claim the benefits than had ever fought in any of these wars. And the government was astounded. And then because these policies were so popular, it was always popular to say, okay, the US government used to have a surplus, right? So congressmen used to say, we actually have a surplus. Why are we not taking more care of people in need in our community? And so then the entitlements would grow. Those people would get elected because they'd grow the entitlements, and then it was impossible to get elected saying that you're gonna shrink the entitlements, so it would keep on growing. So how do we prevent that from happening with this new UBI policy that replaces the welfare policies? How does it start with, a baguette and a glass of water and end up with paid nights at the Four Seasons?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, again, the important thing is, we are not discussing specific items, but yes, we are discussing, or there would be a number. So it would either be whatever, $900 or $1,000 or 1,100 or whatever it is per month. So certainly there would be something to discuss, and certainly, of course, there would be a political discussion, or there would be a political back and forth saying it should be increased or it should not be increased. I mean, I think the answer is similar to how it's today. I mean, even today, but there might be a period where it's popular to ask for more, but there might also be periods where it becomes again popular to say let's we need to reduce this, and we need to increase the incentives to to work beyond that.
So it is subject to politics. And so my other question is, what about when it gets canceled? What if the opposite happened? What if folks got dependent over a couple administrations on having certain needs taken care of? Maybe they were working fewer hours, or maybe they had just gotten used to a style of life where these things were taken care of, and then you rip off the band aid. Could a dependence on something like UBI expose populations to potential harm if the spigot gets turned off, right? Like maybe this is my American sensibilities, but I worry a lot about resilience and dependence. And a system like UBI potentially making the whole population be more dependent than we already are on a central government or a central entity that emitted the UBI.
Well, there is the crypto version that we are working on that does not rely, at least can be a basis or a part of UBI, and that does not rely on a central government. But in general, I guess I have here more the European perspective, and then there I would say ideally the government is society. Our way of life does rely on each other. So kind of almost none of us is really prepared to just live completely on their own. We are dependent on a functioning society, and part of that functioning society, be it that electricity is produced, which is also not, be it that infrastructure is available, be it that food is produced. So kind of in many ways, we are not independent, or we couldn't survive, frankly, if the rest of society would break away.
So there's a beautiful Steve Jobs email actually about this, that he's entirely dependent on the fellow members of his species and grateful to them for his language, his food, his clothing. And I certainly agree with that. We are interdependent. The question is, what's the right amount of interdependent to be to make sure that we're flourishing adaptively and that we're not compromising our kind of potential resilience, I guess. The blockchain based systems, the crypto based systems for issuing UBI. Tell me what you have in mind there. I mean, I feel like every crypto cycle, every time there's a new trendy crypto thing, there's this kind of mirage that something, because it's crypto, is going to make value exist somewhere where it hasn't existed before. I think we saw that a bit with NFTs, we saw it a bit with meme coins, and every time that kind of gets ironed out. And so my question is, how does crypto change the dynamics of UBI so that there's suddenly value available somewhere where it wasn't before?
We are just making value available that is already there. And so in the project we are working on, it's called Circles. It's basically recognizing that choosing something as money, that itself is already to some extent creating value. So kind of if you have a society, if you have a group of people and they together have something that they agree to use as money, then kind of just by agreeing on that, that itself, gives that thing to some extent value. Of course, that alone, I mean, if they would just agree on this, but they wouldn't produce anything as a society, of course, then this would also really help. But still, if you would have two islands where on one island there's a society and they produce some stuff, and on the other they produce the same stuff, but on the other one they have money, then probably this one that has money, that has something that they use as money, would probably develop better than the other one. So now in society we don't have. I mean, we don't have that problem that we have solved the problem of having money. So money is universally understood. It's quite remarkable if you think of money as a tool. So probably, I mean, probably almost everywhere in the world, wherever you go, you don't speak people's language, you absolutely know nothing about their culture, but probably everyone understands a $100 bill, and probably everyone kind of reacts to it. I mean, maybe not, or at least with a sufficient amount of money, almost everyone in the world will, in some form, react to it, change their behavior based on. Or I mean,
Yeah, that it alters behavior.
what are really things that would universally work? And I guess violence would universally work, or kind of threat of violence, saying something, reading a book, whatever. I mean, or I kind of just think of what kind of communications work universally. And I guess violence works universally, and probably money works universally. And beyond that, I'm not even sure what really would work universally. Everything else is very much culture dependent and language dependent. And anyhow, just saying that if we have this, we have already money as a pretty universal tool. But the question is, yeah, who's benefiting from the money? And in Circles, this crypto UBI project, or crypto, first it's money. First, it's meant to be just for a fair and decentralized form of money. In Circles, we basically just say everyone who agrees to use the thing as money, they should equally benefit from the money creation process. In our fiat money system, it's quite opaque who is benefiting from the process of creating money. And in Circles, it's very simple. It's basically just says Circles, or this money, this form of money, comes into circulation purely per person. So the money issuance process is people's based, so 1 unit per hour per person, and that will not provide a full UBI. Given that it's successful, even then it will not provide a full UBI, but it would be one element where the value comes from. It's basically just saying the value that is created from agreeing on a common form of money, that is equally distributed to those that participate in this social contract. Money is essentially a social contract.
Let me try to apply this. So let's say we're in 2035 and AI has taken all the jobs, and my friends and I have very little resources with which to buy things that are out of our price range. They're too expensive. Our group of friends, our neighborhood, issues a currency using circles that we all decide is money, and we can all transact in it with each other. But how does that work when someone in our group needs to bring assets or whatever it is that people want to buy in from the outside into that group, but no one has any money that someone outside that group will honor?
Yeah, right. I mean, it would only work if people, or if those if also those that produce something would use this system. So you need a group of people where the whole group agrees to use this form of money, and also people in that group produce, or within this group there is exchange of goods and services. So if it's completely isolated, that there is a group and they all just issue money, but none of those produces anything, that would not work.
Idea makes total sense to me of circles democratizing and lowering the barrier to entry to any group of people to issue their own money if they're willing to accept it. That makes total sense. What doesn't make sense is why I would include people in my group if I'm able to create value that's recognized even outside of the system of the new money my group's created. Why I'm willing to have people in my group that aren't able to do that. And if I'm unwilling to have people in my group that aren't able to do that, and everyone I want to include is pretty capable of making money in the system that exists outside our group, then why would I need a new currency? Why can't my friends and I, if we can make money outside of the group, why wouldn't we just use the outside of the group's currency?
Well, I would say fundamentally because you would still prefer to use your own money that you can issue yourself. So why? I mean,
Control
I
over
would flip the.
issuance, control over the supply.
Sure. Or I would flip the question and say, why should I do something for the US dollar? Why shouldn't I prefer Martin tokens?
That's my question, right? Like, how many do you prefer margin tokens or do you prefer the US dollar? I would say that you prefer the US dollar.
I would say I would prefer a world where everyone would use margin tokens. Now
Oh
that's
my goodness.
unrealistic. Right, right. So I mean, I'm just saying, kind of, just if you could choose what money would globally be used, then you would probably like to use the money that you can issue yourself.
Sure.
Of course, that's unrealistic to say the whole world uses margin tokens. So kind of how it works in circles is, say, I would prefer the whole world to use margin tokens. You would prefer the whole world to use Amanda tokens. So in circles, we would do this mutual agreement where we say, okay, you accept margin tokens. I, on the flip side, accept Amanda tokens. And then,
So this happened, right? After World War II, the US says we would like everyone to use US tokens. And because it was such a producing and consuming power and such a military power at the time, it made sense to price trades in US dollars and to make it the global reserve currency. So this already happened. But the Martin or the Amanda was the US, and they used financial and military power to make everyone use their token. So what changes here? I mean, don't we just have the balance of currencies in the world that we've already achieved through money and
yeah,
violence?
yeah. I mean, the whole question around. I would agree. The U.S. obviously has, or the U.S. dollar has obviously been the global reserve currency. Yeah, it's quite ironic that there is currently a debate. Well, apparently also within the U.S. and with Trump, whether that's a good thing or not. You could make the argument. Of course, it's nice if you can just print dollars and get stuff from the world. But apparently, Trump is flipping the argument and saying, "Oh, we are all the time kind of sending out papers and getting stuff, and that leads into a situation where we are become less capable as a nation to produce stuff and just able to export papers, and long term that's risky." So kind of, even from the U.S. perspective, or at least from a Trump perspective, he seems to not want that, or want that less. This
He wants the dollar to be the world's reserve currency and to have it pricing trades. I think he's just concerned that the economy has become over financialized and that incentives have led to financialized decision making where you want to optimize how much money you make or a stock price at the expense of taking risk and creating a valuable hard asset. But I think he wants a strong dollar at the end of the day.
then maybe let me speculate less on what Trump wants or not wants. For everyone who's not able to issue dollars, which are most people, it would be more in their interest to use a currency that they have, yeah, kind of the issuance power over. And of course, in circles, this issuance power is very limited. So of course, you cannot just limit issue unlimited. So you're kind of very self-restricted by smart contracts of what you can issue. And then again, there's this mutual agreement of why would I accept yours? Well, because it's a mutual agreement that you, on the flip side, accept mine.
Take me through a use case of maybe a group of people that you expect to start experimenting with or using circles in the near future. What do you expect folks to do with this now that you're launching?
Yeah. In principle, everything, kind of, quote unquote, just use it as money. In practice, there is the simplest use case is, or the simplest way is to start, is that you can trade it, that you would still essentially use dollars or euros or whatever, but you can change your circles against dollars or euros and then still spend them. Of course, that's not where we really want to go. And I mean, this is, I think, also where Bitcoin and Ether has landed. Bitcoin always, or both, kind of said they want to become money, but they have certainly not reached the state where goods and
The
services are
incentive
actually
is just
priced.
not to use it, right? The incentive is to hoard it because of the finiteness.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one element. The other element is that to use it as a medium of exchange, or specifically a unit of account, it's simply way too unstable in value. So kind of, if you would denominate your salary or something in Bitcoin or Ether, and it would kind of could in a couple of months
Something that you and I are both familiar with.
Well, but even
Having
then,
both
I
had
mean,
at various points salaries denominated as such.
well, I mean, I think it was not denominated in Ether, or in, I mean, it still
No, it wasn't.
was
It was
right.
denominated in the USD value of
Exactly,
the coin.
exactly.
The
And
amount
that's
of
a big
coins you'd get would change a lot every month.
right. So Circles has the ambition to actually kind of reach that level of having things denominated in circles. And I would say the reason why this is for, let's say, Bitcoin, to me very unlikely that it will ever be stable, is that the total supply of Bitcoin is completely inelastic. So depending on, I mean, currently probably 1 or 2% of the world population in some form have ever used Bitcoin. And of course, the value of Bitcoin will highly depend on whether that 1 or 2% increases to 10% or reduces to 0.1%. It will remain highly speculative, in my view. In Circles, in contrast, the supply, the total supply, is dependent on the number of people that are participating. The more people are participating, the more supply there will be, which of course means it's also less. Has less this element of the speculative element of saying it could go up 1000x. No, Circles will not be able to go up 1000x. But that, on the flip side, means it, in our view, has the potential to become a medium of exchange.
As a currency whose supply increases with every new participant on the network, you put yourself in the business of proving that people are human. You see where I'm going with this because obviously there's an incentive to claim that there are more people in the network. I'm familiar with another entity that has thought about UBI and gotten into the business of using biometrics to prove whether people are human. What do you think of World and WorldCoin as a UBI project? And how does your perspective with Circles differ from the approach that they're taking?
I do think that, in my view, the for something as well as basic as money, or that's meant to be a money for the world, I think it's highly problematic if there is one single entity that creates a device, then basically then this device says whether you can participate or not, and kind of that
Why?
even
What's the
goes to,
potential for abuse? What's the problem there?
well, I
What's
mean,
wrong with the device?
it's as simple as that they, for legal reasons, decide, okay, in this country we cannot go. Well, and then if you are in this country, then bad luck. I mean, that base, or even in my view, crypto is about self sovereignty and having control, and kind of essentially now I'm in front of this device. I kind of, it looks at my eyeballs, and then either a green light goes on, or a red light. And if a red light goes on, then bad luck. Then kind of I can't complain, or kind of I have not. I mean, basically, I there's
No
nothing I can
recourse.
do, really.
No
So
recourse.
yeah, no recourse. I might have no eyes. So I mean, yeah, it's as simple as that. I'm not completely. I'm definitely not against, or I'm not per se against the use of biometrics. So I think something like WorldCoin, in my view, could very well be a layer on top of a more decentralized protocol. And in my view, that is Circles. So in Circles, it is fundamentally completely open, which also means, yes, you can create as many accounts as you want, uh, including fake accounts. Just creating accounts, they will issue their unique money, and if no one accepts that, no one cares about that, then you're not doing any harm to the system, or kind of you also can't take any advantage from it. So you need to convince others to, well, we call it trust you, and here also groups, or we have the concept of groups. So I see WorldCoin as a very valuable group. So kind of to say, we have this open, permissionless base layer of identity, and then on top of that, you can have all kind of attestations. And one form of attestations is this WorldCoin thing. Another can be, I don't know, zero knowledge proof of your passport. Another one can be kind of purely web of trust based. And I think there can be many ways of, or there should be many ways of how you can essentially establish your identity. I just think that having only one, which is controlled US company, that to me is not a good base layer setup.
So, over the course of this conversation, we started with talking about government UBI programs, and obviously that would be centralized and top down. We talked about WorldCoin, which is one company, which is a different source for UBI, but it's also centralized. It's a company. And then Circles, it's almost like, I don't want to, are you using this term, decentralized UBI? It seems like it's grassroots, or it's bottoms up, or it's self-serve, it's voluntary. How are you describing that, and why is that mechanism important?
I think we are using all of those terms, or are changing the terms, and maybe that's not a good idea. But we sometimes call it just decentralized money, yeah, bottom up money. But yeah, ultimately all those things,
Why is it important it be that way, though?
in my view, just the right incentive. So the most selfish thing, in a way, I can think of is to say I want to create my own money. I don't want to use world coins. I don't want to use U.S. government. I don't want to use someone else's money. I just want to use my own, and that's what Circles does. It says everyone puts in a way the individual at the center and says you should use your own money, or you can use your own money at your own terms, and then it just finds a way to say how to make that practically usable by kind of creating this trust network and having transitive transactions along this trust graph, and essentially starting from tens of thousands or millions of currencies, but then essentially merging them together or creating currency unions that will or can emerge into, well, either just local groups or potentially even a global fungible currency.
So, what's the big new launch? What can people now do with Circles that they weren't able to do before?
Right. So Circles has almost 10-year history. So it is the thing that got me into Ethereum. I saw Bitcoin.
I
I was
remember it for many years.
was fascinated about Bitcoin. Then at some point, was kind of Bitcoin maxi and was telling everyone about Bitcoin. But at some point, kind of realized, does it really? So again, kind of probably 0.1% at the time of the, probably even less than 0.1% of the world population already then held 80-90% of all the bitcoins. Would it really benefit the other 99% that they all would use Bitcoin? It certainly benefited me already a lot to be one of the early bit. But I would still, or I more and more came to the conclusion, Bitcoin is interesting, decentralized and so on, but in my view, it would not necessarily benefit 99% of the people who currently don't hold any Bitcoin, if society overall would shift more towards using it. So basically, Circles came, or the idea was born to say, let's keep the great stuff of Bitcoin, kind of predictable or algorithmic issuance, kind of no central entity, but designed in such a way that it benefits everyone who is choosing to use it. So initially it was described as a fork of Bitcoin. Then Ethereum came along, and I realized it would be much easier to do it as a smart contract in Ethereum, and that got me excited about Ethereum. But reality is, it took then many years kind of for the whole ecosystem to actually develop. So in 2020 we launched the first version, or we actually launched Circles, and it went viral for at least a couple of weeks with over 100,000 people signing up. But unfortunately, still technology was in a way too early. Stuff then didn't really work. Kind of all kind of technical issues, and it slowed down quite a bit, or it was then only used in a couple of places. So in Berlin for 1 or 2 years there were local small group of 15, 20 shops that or kind of maybe community of a couple of hundred people that used Circles. Bali, there was around, or there was an experiment with roughly 1,000 people, but still overall not too much. Now finally we are very close to releasing Circles 2.0, which is still a continuation of the system. So everyone who has Circles can kind of keep those Circles, but we are doing a bunch of new things. So the one thing is simply have a new wallet. that hopefully just works much better and is kind of using the latest technology, and even simple things like using a passkey instead of a seed phrase, and of course gas abstraction and all those things. Yeah, then the really important thing is then the addition of groups. So in the original version of Circles, there are only kind of those individual tokens. And yes, you have this trust network, and therefore you can kind of make them somewhat fungible, but to, let's say, just trade them against USDC or stable coins, it's pretty hard technically, just because in reality, you have all those thousands of different tokens. So kind of just technically you would need different market for Margin Coin, for Amanda Coin, and kind of just this makes it really hard to practically work. So now we have added this concept of groups where you can form groups based on some attestations, based on actual kind of more traditional groups that you say, yeah, we are together a group. And then everyone who's a member of a group can turn their personal circle into a shared group circle. That just makes it much easier to say, yeah, put it on Uniswap or put it on even centralized exchanges. So in the Circles 2.0, just very practically, you will be able to trade circles, which was previously not really possible. Next thing, or maybe last thing I want to mention is also here, 4 years later, we are simply much further. We have things like Gnosis Pay, kind of a Visa card that you could just use a regular Visa card, and you can use crypto to just pay at any merchant that accepts Visa. And then we will essentially create integrations where, of course, then under the hood, you will actually sell circles for USDC or EUROE, which then the merchants will receive. But kind of from a user perspective, you will have the feeling, okay, you have circles, you have your card, and you are able to spend the circles everywhere in the world where Visa is accepted. So kind of just practically, it will much more feel like money that you can actually use.
Congrats on all the progress. And I'm personally excited to issue my Amanda coin and see if I can convince anybody to use it while I retain my iron grip on the supply. So that sounds great. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you one last question. Slight change of topic. I know I'm going to get accused of burying the lead, but you mentioned that you're kind of an AI doomer. I feel like I need to ask you if you think that all of this could not happen because we're all going to die. I feel like I need to ask you, play
Yeah.
out the scenario. Why are you an AI doomer? Walk me through the logical steps that take us to all dying.
Yeah. So I think we are quite close to creating a new form of life. So to have uh, essentially independent agents, whatever you want to call them, but things that can start to accumulate resources. So kind of they can start to right now earn money in various forms, and kind of we have done experimentally. We still have this prediction market background at Gnosis, so we have experimentally done autonomous AI agents that trade prediction markets, that basically try to gather information about events, whether they will happen or not. Do this 24/7, form an opinion about, I don't know, how this election is going, how this niche topic is going, and then kind of they autonomously trade on this information. And that's of course just a tiny example. There are all kind of other ways of how agents could make money. I mean, we are quite close to, or many of the jobs that can be done via remote work are in principle doable by agents. So I think it's not that far off that we will see agents that go to a GitHub repository, see an open ticket.
But they take all the money, they get all the jobs, they take all the money. How do we die as part of that?
If there's a new species, or if we just look at how we as humans, what we did to species that dominated the planet before us. So there's this funny metric of just looking at the biomass of animals, of wild animals.
Mice are
And they,
doing great on biomass. Ants are doing great on biomass.
yeah, but mammals, in terms of mammals, I believe it's like 1 or 2% of the biomass of mammals is from wild animals, and I think it's 20 or 30% is humans, but 70% is domestic animals that humans essentially just kind of
Why wouldn't we
created.
be like the mice or the ants?
but it could very well be that the AI, or kind of what are the things we are competing with, or what I don't necessarily think that the AI or those agents or this new form of life has a goal to kill us in the same way that we didn't have the goal to kill all the wild animals, but we just used resources in space, and kind of this AI will probably have an infinite appetite for energy, and data centers. I think there's no ceiling of energy usage. So, I mean, it's not clear if the AI is just building more and more energy and consuming more and more energy and building more and more, I don't know, data centers. It's not clear necessarily what the role of humans will be. So, yes, it could be that they that we kind of are still just around like ants or mice. I'm not ruling that out, but it's certainly also possible that the AI will kind of find us annoying or simply doesn't care about us and has so much bigger goals. I mean, you can go full doom scale that it uses all the energy of the sun and I mean, kind of those far out Dyson sphere. But yeah.
I feel ya. Okay, great. I'm glad you spelled that out. It's good to have that out there. I mean, personally, I think that probably our energy use to that level of AI will feel like a little write-off, and they'll be perfectly happy to let us on our way like the mice and the ants. But very interesting scenario to paint and to consider.
I mean, I think it is a valid comparison to think of how we
Biomass
treat
is super valid for sure.
how we treat animals. So I mean, yeah, just last week I was in Ghana, in well, in a place where you would actually still see completely or more or less untouched wildlife. Yeah, you could argue, we humans, that it wouldn't hurt us to allow those elephants and those lions and so on. But no, of course, there is a conflict of resource, and of course, there are legitimate reasons to say we rather want to use the land for farms or for whatever, and those things that are running around there are just annoying. So
Fair.
we should kill them.
I'm just hopeful that this ultra intelligent, power consuming AI is good at finding new, cheaper sources of power such that we don't feel like such a burden. Fingers crossed. Otherwise, soon they're going to be little machines in a safari looking at our funny little encampment
Right,
having a jolly old vacation.
right, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate this. And congrats on the launch. And thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Endgame. Please follow me on X, Amanda Cassett, 2 S's, 2 T's. Follow the company I founded, Serotonin HQ, and listen wherever you get your podcasts: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the works.